Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Spotlight Conversations. My name is Tandy, your host for today. And I'm not alone. I have a panel. I have the usual guru, if I can call him that, our resident Mfundisi. Welcome back, Mfundisi. We missed you last week.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And then we've got our resident youth comrades. I wanted a nice way. We have our resident, youth, not replacement, representative. Your English is gone today. Welcome, Nqo.
Thank you.
And then, as usual, we always invite another voice, a different voice, to bring in opinion into this. And today we've got our brother Linda Jakavula joining us. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
So, what are we talking about today? Well, South Africa is looking at having local elections towards the end of the year. And so the topic of politics is really in everyone's mind, and let alone the fact that there's been a lot that's happening in the political landscape in the country. So if you just watch the news or read the papers, you will actually see that it's an interesting time politically. So we thought it would be apt that we actually look at politics and look at politics in general, because as Christians, and especially as Adventists, sometimes we're not really sure how to engage with the political landscape. So please remember, we are live. Send through your comments, send through your questions. Do it early so that we can get to them and be able to interact with them. But my first question, Mfundisi, just so we're clear on what it is that we're talking about, what is politics?
Politics is the science or study or practice of governing a specific community based on its culture, history, religiosity, and its material needs related to development into the future.
And yet it seems that politics has turned out to be a swear word for some reason. Why is that?
It certainly is a tragedy. Well, you and I who live now might think things are bad now than they were in the past. There has always been fallenness since Adam fell into sin. And some of the worst things in history happened centuries ago. We still are yet to see the worst based on what the Bible tells us about the end time events. All nations have politics. Politics, the term politics originates from Greek police, a community of people run by a particular culture or governance system. And when these cities had become bigger and with multi-community residences or places where people did trade and so on, we now talk of a metropolis, something bigger than the original. People tend to live together for a number of reasons: defense, commerce, religion, and to protect a particular cultural and epistemic tradition. One reason why we have the type of politics that Europeans had was that in the past, because there were no states, people would build a wall around their community, and that the community inside the wall would be a city. Historically, in Europe, a city is a settlement of human beings that has a cathedral. If there's no cathedral, you are not declared a city. Which is why Soweto has been named a city, because we have the Regina Mundi Cathedral of the Catholic Church. Interestingly, its name is very eschatological. Regina Mundi means the queen of the earth. Mundi is a Greek term for the earth. That's why we've got AM Anno Mundi. Fine.
So politics is a system of governance.
Basically,
in a simple form, it's a system of governance. And there's different types of systems,
Fine.
obviously, in terms of how governance comes through.
Yeah.
And these, from what you're saying, have evolved over time.
Yes.
Now, where I want us to go, and I want to bring that in very quickly, is then, if politics is a system of governance, who is the politician? Can anyone be a politician? Are there certain people who should be in that space? And I'm asking this because a lot of times as Christians, we tend to then relegate it to other, the system of governance.
I think today we have an opportunity to score points against invalid Adventist theories about the negativity of politics. Adventism, in terms of its structure and administrative practice, is a politics. It's an ecclesial politics. We have got a president. The word term president by Adventist organization structure, by the way, is very Romanian. I suppose it's because the church originated in a state that was mimicking Roman culture, which is why the White House in United States called the Capitol. The Capitol was where Julius Caesar was murdered in Italy, right? But I've not fully zeroed in on the question you had asked. I sense I simply went broader. Repeat your question.
So you said politics is a system of governance.
Yes.
Full stop.
Fine.
Right? So I'm trying to get to, how do we get to a space where we relegate politics to other?
Good. Yeah, I think that's an important term, important issue, because it particularly for missionary Christianity in countries other than Europe and the US, the United States of America. What happened is that because of the evolutionary theory, which arose during the time of the missionary period, and the embrace, particularly by the Anglican Church and the Methodist Church in Europe, in England, of what was called shorter Oxford logic, and the fact that evolution in England was preached from the pulpits. They then viewed nations other than white nations as inferior, needing the concept God as they understood it. And thus they designed a missionary program that had to remove from us what they assumed was paganism and implant into our system Christianity, which unfortunately had been marred by their own politics, their systems, their traditions, and so on. Which is why the largest church in the world, the Catholic Church, is the most pagan church in history, because it became very political by amassing crowds from all countries it could, and even persecuting those who were opposed to its doctrines and practices. So the challenge we have now as a church in South Africa, as a continent, is that we were colonized by politicians who masqueraded as missionaries. This is our greatest challenge, and Adventists are not excluded from this evil.
But Linda, let me bring you in here, right? Somfundis is saying politics is a system of governance. And where we are now in terms of religion is because the missionaries that came in were actually politicians. But did we then not have a system of governance when they came through? So what isn't politics, because if we're taking it as general as that, then they were politicians who came to a political space as well.
Yeah, well, it obviously the colonizers came into an existing system. You can look at it in many ways, but what we look at in our time as traditional systems is possibly our political system that we had as Africans. Having said that, I think as a matter of fact, we can't have this conversation without reflecting to that kind of history. Remember, what they come with themselves comes in pre-medieval era. They had reason, passion, lust, right? Reason, passion, lust. So lust are the slaves, right? The lower class, and passion are the soldiers and civil servants, and reason are religious, politicians, all that, and it was mixed. There was no separation into this. Hence, when you look at the history of revolutions, there's fighting that system up until there's something we look at today as secularism, because the view was this reason is in its form is our problem, and part of that problem was you stay where you belong. Right? So reason, passion, lust is not just about me and the body. It's the society as well, right? I reason. These are leaders, philosophers, religious leaders, all of us here. And we give birth to the likes. So our children will be the reason for the next generation. And passion, soldiers will give birth to soldiers. Last slaves remain there. Don't cross the path. So when you just look at all of that, then you see why we had revolutions. So, and therefore when these things go and they bring this to us, they bring it exactly the original of that three. I said primedival means long ago, but that has not really changed. And this is why even if you look at the legal system, you see that connection to religion to it. If you study law 1, you go and learn the basics of Roman Dutch law. But when you look at it, you will trace it to religion, 10 commandments and all those. So that connection between religion and so-called philosophers, which are suppose it's everything in that science. It's not philosophy as we know it today. All scientific thinking, all smart people, politicians, all those people belonged into that upper class, and that's the reason. So their job was to lead the rest.
Interesting, and I want to come back to that, but let me bring you in here. Growing up, what was your perception of politics? And I'm specifically bringing this in because I know you grew up Gwamfundis, right? So already the religion is there. But what is the conversation around the table? What was your perception of politics?
It was simple. We don't vote because we can't be assured the people that we're putting in power won't go against us eventually. So it was always you'll partake, their sins will be part of your sins because you've put them in power or something like that. So it was always one of those things where you just don't vote.
And that's the understanding I got when we joined the church. I mean, I was a child then, but I knew that we don't vote because it's their thing, it's the politicians, and none of them are clean. And especially in South Africa around that time, apartheid, it was like, can you see what's actually happening? But now to your point, Linda, then you're saying, but these were all the same group of people. The governors, the politicians, and the philosophers, and the religious people were all the same group of people. Where did the division start? Where did this us and them, or is it just us as Christians who've created that division?
I don't think that really happened. But like I'm saying, to my point, the revolutions that came, and hence we are talking even secularism, is what created this fictitious difference. Otherwise, in essence, there's never a religion. I mean. To date, any smart politician will associate with church. They don't have to believe anything. But I mean, the prophecy that we understand, Catholic, you see that has not changed. Look at how the Pope is treated whenever he goes all over the world. It has not changed. It's fictitious. The only problem. With us, and for me, this is the materiality of this, is that missionaries, and from a school point of view, the liberals are the biggest poison of this thing. And the challenge we have is that if you go to school to show your scholarity, you align with them. They give you things that do not exist, like non-racialism, right? They give you, it's a myth, and the idea is so that you are abused to protect the oppressor in the absence of the oppressor. So Africans have been taught that their function is to protect white supremacy, even when whites are not around. And we're doing an excellent job in it.
Mfundisi, I'm going to bring you back to what Ngobile said, and I can see you're nodding with Brother Linda there, but before we get there, it makes sense though, doesn't it?
It does.
It makes sense. Don't get involved because these politicians are making decisions that can even go against our principles. So what's wrong with that logic?
There are two things that are wrong. Number one, that statement, which looks genuine, is very faulty. It is meant to deceive the listener. The practitioner of a religion brought to him not by God, but Western politicized missionaries who think that going to the mission field, the darker races, is an act of civilizing them by spiritualizing them. You see, they never sat, Jesus sat with the people whom he was evangelizing, ate with them, ate from them, slept with them, dressed the way they dressed, spoke their language. Missionaries never did that. They never stayed with us. Let me tell you something you may not know. In all the schools we had before, let's say 1960, there were little pondokis whose keys were kept in the union office in Johannesburg, and these rooms were meant for the missionary leader who comes and then he sleeps there. It would be cleaned when he's told the people, I'm coming. There was such a house that I saw when I was teaching Swaziland, and it would not be used by anybody. It would be a crime for any person to use it. You had it in Kangela. I once heard Bafuya say there was such a thing in Kangela and in many other places. So remember also that most Adventist whites who founded Adventism had not been born within the Adventist church. That is why Adventist theology and socio-theology had to grow into something purer and mature. But unfortunately, it was growing within a broader context of the internationalization of colonization. So it became tarnished by those who were coming in. Currently, the Adventist church is one of the most compromised churches in the world because less than 20% of its membership were not born in the church.
But Mfundisi, is this separation of politics and religion, is it unique to Adventism?
It is not unique to Adventism, but it has embattled Adventists here and even cast their path to progress.
But I still want to get...
Especially in the black community, because we're told to separate the two. Because politics belongs to the world. You see, what missionaries brought here was pagan thinking covered in religion. The Bible has no such distinction in life, division of the politics, of the political and the secular. No, there's no such thing. Life comes to you as a whole. Life presents itself to you as a whole. You don't have a political self and a religious self and a social self. No, you don't have that. Ultimately, this type of doctrine that Adventists have been teaching all these years, that politics should not be part of religion, is an anti-creationist, anti-God theology. Because God is both a political leader of the universe. He's also the religious leader. He's also he is everything to us.
Isn't this coming from, and I don't know if you can come in, I'm now thinking of when the Israelites wanted a king, right? So in my mind, they wanted their own political structure, right? Because they wanted a king. And yes, they eventually got the king, but God was really against that. He was like, but why do you need a king? Why do you want to emulate what the world is doing? Is that not then the same logic that I am your king? Why do you need to be involved in politics? You've just said God is our political head. Why should we be involved in worldly politics?
But the problem with that is that story was told to black people, not to whites. Which is why white people in this country, Adventists, pastors, took arms to fight against the ANC, the PAC, SWAPO in Namibia. They were even spies for the apartheid government.
Uti correct nai. So wait, that story that's in the Bible was only told to black people.
No, listen. Jews historically and ethnologically were dark-skinned people. They were, we said this earlier in another discussion. So the whole, there's not a single white writer of the Bible. The Bible was stolen. I'm using a very kind word. When they evangelized, they brought into the faith their own practices. And that mixture created a religion that became very syncretic. What whites brought here in 1652 and in the last 300 years was syncretic Christianity. A Christianity that had a mixture of the satanic and the sacred together.
No, let me bring you in here. So that was the message growing up, right? But you've now moved away from home. You've grown into self, or still growing into self. What's your thoughts now?
Even at home, we had voted, but there was still that guilt. Like, if the party that I voted for does something, then I am also guilty of it. But interesting enough, preparing for this discussion, I'm reading different articles from, Illinois, GC, that they didn't say that don't vote. It's just do your due diligence on whoever you want to elect. Yeah. So don't just look at, okay, this party has history, but look at what do they want to enforce once they're in power. What do they believe? What issues are they going to tackle? And to me, it's the same as even with my career, my profession, that law. There's certain, we have a constitution. Everyone has a right to be equal. Everyone has the right to, decide who they want to love and all these things. But there's certain areas where you go, okay, but personally, what the Bible tells me doesn't go with the constitution. And personally, what I know and my religion doesn't go with whatever the political party wants to then put in power once they're there.
Can I just bring in there, now that both of you mentioned, you mentioned Sister White, so I also went and I looked at some quotes there, and I just want to read a few. So this is taken from Testimonies, and it says, "With sadness, I have discerned that many of them are becoming politicians, and that is against God. They enter into questions and debates and theories that they have no need to touch." That's volume 95. I don't know how to read that. 42.2, I think is volume 95. Here's another one. It says, "Sentiments brought to the front by politicians, voiced by some who proclaim to be Sabbath keepers, is the working of satanic agencies to bring in confusion, to bewitch the minds of the old and the young." This is from Special Testimonies, volume 8, page 20. The last one I picked up was, "The God of many professedly wise men." And then she quotes philosophers, poets, I was surprised by that, politicians, journalists, "the God of the polished, fashionable circles of many colleges and universities, even some theological institutions, is slightly a little better than Baal." So she speaks very strongly about what politics does in terms of what it brings to the church and to the mind of the people in the church. That it's satanic agencies are bringing confusion. And when you think about it, right, when you bring up the topic of politics in any environment, there's bound to be disagreement, conflict, and all of that. And it sounds like that's what she's guarding against, isn't it? To say, to minimize, to maximize unity, to minimize conflict, let's stay away from topics that can lead to that.
Yeah, I don't think I have capacity to explain Ellen White, but here's the issue. The issue is that everything in governing a society, is political. Okay, if you listen to the theories, right? The theories, hence with different parties. Okay, the theories you develop you are giving us a picture of your utopia, as to say this society is going to develop if we follow things like this. Now, economics is informed by politics. So anyone, honestly, it doesn't matter who the source is. Anyone who has an issue with politics has to literally be able to say, don't be economically active. Because your politics informs your economic policies. And therefore we play in that space. That's number one. Number two, it goes back to another point made by Wabongosi earlier. The idea of separating our lives is a myth. It does not exist. And partly why it's perpetuated. Again, it's meant to protect the oppressor, because the oppressor can oppress me during the week, but we come to church and be unified and praise God together, right? So that church environment can be peaceful. And then the church creates this fake peace of unity that does not exist, by the way. Even in this country, to date, we still have racial-based organizations, right? But the majority, who is Africans, have been subdued enough to be able not just to accept it, but to even belong to those conferences and support them with their monies. So it's this is exactly a system it's achieving exactly what it was designed for. So that you sleep during the week, but let's come on Sabbath, we are all saints. Missionaries never saw us as heavenly candidates.
Yes.
Missionaries saw us as people to abuse, and then after abusing us, then they teach us forgiveness so that as to allow them to get away with it permanently. And they are winning.
You know, you've just proved Sister White right. Because it sounds like you're inciting, and that's what exactly she's saying. She's saying, when you bring these things into the church, it causes division, because then the conflict comes through. So as you were talking, I was like, but that's what she's saying. That's exactly what she's saying, isn't it?
That's not what she's saying.
Otin.
Ellen White lived during a milieu where there was slavery. She participated in the anti-slave movement. She kept black kids in her family, 13, even funded them with tithe. When she came back from Australia, after she was exiled by the General Conference, she did not tithe until she died. She was using the money to support her, the kids she had. Ellen White has unfortunately been misunderstood by some black people. You need to read her in the context of the sociology of the United States politics and what she was against. But for instance, between 1854 and 1856, if you go through her diary of those years, one of the evenings she says, we discussed whether we should vote or not, and we came to the conclusion that each man must use his own conscience. It's in her diary. You get the point? So what Jakavula is saying here is valid. There needs to be a drive from the black Adventist church, because whites are not going to redeem us. I'm being honest with you. Which is why they have no interest in our welfare. We're busy trying to coddle them. They don't need us, even in the church. They need us for political convenience, which is why the statement sent to the TRC by whites was carved at Helderberg without black input. And when we demanded a copy in the 1984, was it 84 session, I think, in Bloemfontein, Pastor Parkinson would not give us the document. I only found it in Google. And I've written a counter statement, which I've not disclosed yet, because that thing has holes. You can throw spears in it, and they get good. So let me tell you the truth, Sister Andy. Adventists came here by God's design. But unfortunately, they had no ideologically clean minds, right? So what we need to do now is to challenge all these things that have damaged the development of black Adventism in South Africa. Interpersonal struggles. Pastors are not united, for instance. Stories that happen among them can shock a politician. And which is why most of us who are pastors' kids never follow our fathers, because this thing is a failure. This thing has robbed us of joy. This thing has robbed us of money. This thing has robbed us of food. Because the church here is as racist as any other thing in the world. There is no valid Adventism in South Africa.
You know, Mfundisi, when we were talking about women in ministry a few weeks ago, we read a statement from Mr. Wilson. And he basically also uses the same sentiment when he was asked about women ordination. He also says, let's rather stay away from topics that are divisive in nature than to actually address them. And I'm just seeing, that continued theme. So it would look like as a practice, we don't go into the uncomfortable topics as a church. That's the stance that we've actually taken, is that we don't go into the uncomfortable topics. And that's been adopted even by the Black Adventist. So it's not just the white Adventist thing, it's adopted by the Black Adventist. Because
are they black?
Well,
Black in ethnology, but not in thought. You see, the end. This world is about to end. All truth must come out now. I'm being honest with you. We can't leave them with the mess we inherited from missionaries. We can't. These kids don't argue, they leave. Mina now will stay in the church, but these leave. Yeah, because they don't want to be handling a mess from their parents and grandparents. They just leave. After declaring that this thing does not work.
I just want to remind everyone at home that we are live, so if you have any comments, any questions, I'm hoping you do. Please bring your voice through, because we would like to interact with you as well. And what are your views? What were your thoughts growing up? Where are you now? If you have kids, what are you actually teaching your kids when it comes to politics? Now, when we look at just the political landscape, and even in South Africa, but you can look at it broadly, honestly, Mfundisi, I don't know, I'm trying to find a word, that it just feels safer to stay away from it, because you can lose your religion when you look at what's happening in politics. It seems to be a dirty game. And I'm now talking about governance, right, of cities and countries. It really looks like a dirty game. It looks like you need to be just as corrupt to be able to make it in there and survive. There's a number of seemingly well-meaning politicians who seem to fall on the wayside by the looks of things. It's like you need to. So can we really make inroads and be a true Christian?
Let me tell you, I notice I want to say something, but let me make this point. The greatest fault of academics, philosophers, and politicians in the last 500 years was to create this thing called secularism. Unfortunately, of course, it begins in the Garden of Eden. You see, there's no such thing as religion outside of anything else, because religion defines who we are universally. So religion is the super epistemology. All others fall under it. How we relate to God as Lord and Creator. It's a political relationship. We relate to Him as an educator. It's an educational relationship. God is the master of the universe. What we did, finally, we overthrew God from society. And that's why we've got all these doctrines playing games on us.
But Linda, do you want to come in there? Because when you're looking just from a layman's perspective, and you're looking at who the politicians are, what's playing out there, it really just feels safer to stay out of it.
Well, until you have just a 10% taste of the church, and then you will discover that the church might be worse. Here's something very fascinating about church. Forget pastors. That an individual can fight to have a position. Now, if you have a position in church, it takes your time, it takes your money. It doesn't give you anything back. But we are willing to fight to get there and stay there. In fact, one of the things, whenever you observe a crowd, you can look at this thing, people will not show anything. But one thing, when you get closer, you will discover that almost all of us wants to be elders. We are quietly hoping that my turn will come. But when I was growing up, they were not just quietly hoping, they would campaign for it in this church.
when I was growing up, we would see adults visiting homes to make sure that they are elected as elders. So here's the point. So the point I'm making is that when you look at this, it's true. I can't argue. You see lots of corruption, etc. It's all over, and it's like we won't make it. But that's one. So I'm not sure which system is clean. That's the point I'm making. But most importantly, assuming that we have the right posture, who then should fix the messed up system if we are staying away from it?
We're waiting for Jesus to come. And then we'll have our heavenly kingdom and not worry about politics. What you said just reminded me of a quote I wrote by Mahatma Gandhi. And I'm not going to go into his politics, just the quote. He says, "Those who say religion has nothing to do with politics do not know what religion is." To the point that you just raised. Venice, there are some countries that are run where the religion is like a really strong, obviously strong one. And I look at a lot of the Middle East countries, for example. Are they better off when you look at just, because from the outside, obviously, we are making a lot of assumptions, but are they better off than countries that are, for example, like ours, which are democratic, and so we are multi-religions? I mean, we're almost 80% Christian in South Africa, but we're not a Christian state, as an example, right? So our countries who openly own that religion and it's at the forefront of running the country, are they necessarily better off?
Not necessarily. And I'm glad you've asked that question, because there's always this tendency of us claiming that those who are outside of Christianity are worse than those who are within Christian, democratic or Republican systems and so on. The beauty about those countries is that they have a culture of cohesion. They have one culture generally. You see, when you have one national culture, it's easy to have one religion. But when we have the type of thing that happened to us in 1952, where everybody is allowed to put his own theory and so on, philosophy, we have a serious problem. Which is why this country is not going to rest until it goes back to sense over what it means to be a black an African South African, what it means to be a white, because all of us are tarnished. Some are grabbing land in order to protect interests. Some are looking for the land for part of their some are looking for money, and the thugs are also establishing their own state. There's a new state in South Africa, the state of the hooligans. It exists. It's perhaps we can call it the fourth estate. You get the point? And no one is going to destroy it until something is right on the roof.
Are you saying democracy is the problem?
Human beings were not designed to run themselves. They were designed to be run by the Creator. Democracy is just as evil as any other thing. Anything outside of God's rule is sin.
Which takes us back.
Listen, genetically, in the scheme of creation, anything created is not autonomous. It exists and it lives well when it is in relationship with the Creator. Remember, as long as you are a creature, you don't have all power.
So let me ask this, and I'm asking you, no, sorry. So all political parties have their issues, as some politicians say, have their little skeleton yanas, right? But on an ideological basis, there's a number of things that as a Christian you think, about that, right? At the same time, we want to engage. What is the thinking now? How is it, because during the obvious apartheid days, and I'm saying obvious because there's subtle apartheid that's still happening. During the obvious apartheid days, it was you then join a youth wing, a political party, or whatever, right? In the absence of that, how are young people expressing their love for the country and wanting things better or different? Especially those with the religion that's also still there, creating some confusion about shouldn't I openly participate?
I honestly don't know. Listening to discussions, I'm even more confused. And thinking, for instance, how the youth has voiced themselves it doesn't seem like we are contributing either, because we see people burning down schools, we see people, bringing down statutes that represent the apartheid times. I don't think we know how to channel our confusion, our anger, and I don't really think we know how to channel it and how and where we should go, because like you said, the parties are all it's just all messy. So where do we go? So I'm quite confused myself.
So what do we do, Belinda? What do we do? Because we are where we are now. We have a constitution that sounds good on paper, and I mean, we've been sold democracy, right? And we've bought into democracy, rights, human rights, all of that. But this constitution has also then allowed for certain practices that then us as Christians are cringing on and thinking, okay, yes, it's democratic, but it's not in line with the word of God. Where do we go? As someone who still wants to be true to my beliefs, but I also feel like I actually have a duty to my country.
Look, I don't think any of us have a straightforward answer to that, except to the idea of living, right? When we say believe, we mean to be living. I think the essence goes back to that the problem with us in all these spaces, including the church, and this is part of the problem, because you see, some of these developments, by the way, happened because the church failed. So the idea anybody has that the church should be the center. The history is proving that theory wrong. So, and therefore the idea really that no, the church is the best one, and the idea as you rightly said, that the idea is that all of us, because we want to belong to church. So we always paint a picture of conforming to what the church is supposedly standing for. And all these things cause conflict. But the biggest challenge we as humanity have is to say, if this is who I am from a belief system, then let's live it. And that's really the essence, because in that living, then we find more things that unite us. So that the future, the vision, what we have, it's something we live. And when then we're saying, then because we have this thing in common, it's the pulling force, our why. Then that why is what's going to influence how we participate in terms of giving the country direction. I'll give you a very controversial figure, for example, and I'll hear how do you want to deal with it. We are told, if you go to SID, I used to attend a lot of their sessions. One of the things the Zimbabwe Union president is going to boast you about is that every fourth person in Zimbabwe, every fourth person you meet in Zimbabwe is an Adventist. You know what that means? It means that 25% is core to the picture you have of Zimbabwe today.
Yes, because I was going to say, looking at the state of Zimbabwe now, is that 25% cause, or is it, is it a reflection of the fact that 25% of the people are Adventist? But that's, Fundis, Ben Carson. So Ben Carson comes, he campaigns in the US, he runs to run the US. He's not campaigning for a state to be a governor, he's campaigning to be a president. What were the Adventist reaction? I just want you to take us there. Officially, and maybe unofficially.
Yeah. There was a lot of skepticism from some quarters. Let me tell you something else. Generally, the black community in the United States, at its worst, goes for the Democrats. right? Yeah. Some waver, others don't vote. Our brothers and sisters in the States, if we have to be honest now, are in a major historic fix. Because they live at the mercy of the winds of change. Which is why they've become champions of salvation. Champions of thought liberation within Christianity. Because they've no abiding seat there. Their only salvation is to rise to Mount Pisgah and look for Jehovah's hand there. They only participate in political processes insofar as civil order is concerned. This is what I've been reading in the politics of the United States. But I doubt if Ben Carson had really believed that he would be a valid president. I've got relatives in the States who tell me that after the election of Biden, Ben Carson has gone back to church and people just see him as so he's here, so what? It seems he has lost the social aura within Adventism that he had then. Because they assume he voted for a party that had no intrinsic interest in black people or in black development. But I'm talking as an observer.
Yes,
Yeah.
obviously. What did that do for the church, though? Because then there was interest in, firstly, who are the Adventists. I mean, there was a number of, you could even watching the news, it's almost like this is a new church that's come through. I was very surprised by that, which obviously shows how internally focused we are, that we think everyone knows who we are. But what did it do for the church having someone that exposed in a political
I think
sphere?
the answer is varied, and it is also context-based. I read a Christian magazine in South Africa which applauded the fact that these were non-Adventists in South Africa, who applauded the fact that a Christian, at least is of a conservative type, is going into the White House to doctor it. But the system cannot be changed by one individual. America is the Pope of the world in the area of politics. So I doubt if Ben Carson did anything significant. Remember, he was also in the portfolio of housing. I don't know what he did, personally. And I did not follow American politics close enough to know his contribution. But relatives of mine have told me that his voice has been impacted within the Adventist Church by his appointment to that cabinet.
I want to read these comments that have come through. Thank you very much for your contribution. But I want you to also think about that. So we're talking about Ben Carson, he's an American.
Yeah.
Who can we quote, South African Adventist, who is an obvious out there political figure, still retaining his Adventism, so who hasn't separated from the church to be involved in politics? Think about that while I read this. So the one question says, it's from Snetemba Mongwe, thank you very much. It says, don't we need an African political system designed to liberate Africans? And then Kafuze says, do we need a system in a church? Administrative system has been politicized and it will be very difficult for the next generation. So again, I think he's looking at politics, as we said, it's a system of governance. So I want us to look into that, but also just bringing into South Africa, any visible South African politicians, active politicians who are also actively Adventist and okay about that. Because I mean, I think of Judge Mogoeng, nobody can deny his Christianity, and he feels strongly about that, and he's strongly visible as well. Who's our...
The nearest name I'm thinking of is Dr. Chief Mamangosu Piteles, whose roots are in Adventism.
Ouch.
Yes. And he chose a particular path that was peculiar to his thinking and what he had hoped South Africa would look like. Some called him a tribal politician, others called him what was this? A regional politician. I want to reason that his role in politics, without his intention, tended to project and ethics that brought a particular ethos within sections of the Zulu-speaking community. And I'm going to divulge something here that many people don't know. Many pastors, black pastors in KZN, held IFP membership secretly. They had cards of the because we were voting for somebody not only of the soil but who is linked to our faith. Remember, the mother of Buthelezi was an Adventist until she died. Fine. But I can't say they were doing something wrong. I think in their thinking, they felt we need to support a fellow brother, a black brother, also somebody who's advocating for Zulu integrity and so on. There are many merits you could throw within his bag, but other forces regarded him as a divisionist, as an agent of another system, which led to the type of mess military mess we saw in KZN. But remember also that what we then forgot was that Buthelezi had to play a significant role in protecting not only his thinking and the thinking he shared with other people, but the royal house in particular, as a senior a member of the house. You know, I was actually saying to my wife and my some of my relatives, it's interesting that it's good that he has lived up to this stage in terms of his age. Perhaps there would have been major fission in the royal house. All right. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say every politician has his merits and his demerits. De Klerk was liked by the Boers, but we hate him. Botha was liked by his people, but we hate him. Mandela was liked by a section of the black people. There are other people who did not like him. So as long as we are this side of heaven, politics is always going to be an imperfect system for correcting human wrongs.
Can we just, this comment here that then brings in church politics and talks to the structure of the church, and that's the administrative structure of the church. But is there a possibility of functioning without an administrative structure?
Humans can't do that. Since the fall of Adam, we need control. Because sin is a system of lack of control. You do as you like, you do as you wish, you do whatever you want to do. Sin in its very fabric is anarchy. It is not just defection, it is anarchic. It's a stew that allows you, that gets spilled on the floor and takes different directions, like a river that has many tributaries. That is the problem with sin. And yet righteousness tends generally to follow a uniform track.
So we do need some administration. We need a structure.
We need an administration. But I have come, this is my private view, I believe that we need a general conference, but not the type that we have. I suspect, my belief is that the General Conference has become very autocratic in its epistemology and in how it represents Jesus and God and heavenly angels. I'm totally against the European pictures of Jesus and angels in our literature, because I know that Jews were never at any time white people until they underwent miscegenation through exile and other things. Historical Jews are dark-skinned people. No one wrote the Bible except our people.
But then let me bring it in there, right? So you said earlier on the biggest problem is this trying to fragment ourselves. This is the church me, this is the work me, this is the all of that. Now when you look at the church structure and the church administration, then shouldn't we expect that to even be better run, because the religious part of it is obviously embraced there, and we have so a system of governance, for example. Wouldn't we expect the church structure to then be faring better than the world structure?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, that's a reasonable expectation, but as I think we have this understanding. I don't think it should shock us. We should just know that as human beings we are fallible, and one of the things human beings do they work for their benefit. I'll give you as a conversation I have with a certain union president, not the current, but not so long ago. So we have this conversation about a remuneration policy, right? So the conversation goes, and this is a policy of the church, right? The remuneration goes, an accountant can only earn 80% of the scale. A pastor earns 100% of the scale. Okay? Now, you know why that policy is palatable? Because this church is run by pastors.
Yes.
So for them, when they are sitting in these committees, because there are few lay people who participate in these things, and a lot of us who are participants really are there. There's not much to offer, but we are there because we voted through some structures, because we spoke a lot in certain meetings. But those kind of things, it just shows exactly that. I mean, you must listen. If you think pastors have problems, you must listen to teachers, people who have taught in the schools of this church how they were treated. You know, and one of the things you'll discover in life is that once a system is entrenched, and the one part I like about that is a capitalistic system. One of the things you'll discover is that once you are a capitalist, that you are black doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Hence the comment, is it just a pigment or are they black? Because once people become capitalist, they will pay the same salaries the oppressor paid the workers, because they are capitalist. And that's what happens. So whenever people get into a system and control it, they do anything for their benefit. And that in that process is going to disadvantage others. So I'm saying we accept that this thing can never be perfect because we're in a sinful world. But as we say that, we acknowledge that those who have higher influence will do their best to be the biggest beneficiaries.
Yeah.
So politics is politics, whether it's in the church or outside the church. Politics is politics. Mfundisi, as we start winding down, I can't believe our hour is already almost up. Is it an official stance of the church to not get involved? So, for example, to not vote, or is it just precaution and practice?
It's an official stance of the white church. Unfortunately, the white church is even black. There are blacks who are in the white church in their thinking. So they obey man more than God. God is the major politician of existence. He is everything you can. He's the president, he's the ruler, he's the creator, he's everything. All politics is centered in him because he's the originator of life. But as long as we draw pieces from him, not the whole of his character, we're going to malfunction as human beings. The problem with sin is not the rebellion. It is that you are taking part of something and you declare it the whole.
Imam Fundis, when you say it's official, are you saying as in policy, ibhalwe phansi,
What?
that we don't get involved in politics?
Adventists preach against that. You find it in texts. You find it in practice. You find it in committees. But it's a white gospel to protect whites from being condemned by black insiders. That's all I can tell you now. And that is why pastors have to be trained. They have to be trained by whites as well, so that this thing is embedded in their context. That we don't teach politics here, because whites are afraid of being exposed for their injustices in the church.
Yes, why I'm asking and why I'm putting it out there is because there's someone who's sitting at home now who's watching, who wants to toe the line with the church, and they're thinking it's an official written down policy that's going to need a GC to ratify it. But if you're saying it's just propaganda and practice that's passed on, then that's different.
It's even documented. Propaganda can be documented. You see, the problem with the church in South Africa is that it thinks it is autonomous in its epistemology. We have borrowed models from a fractured United States economy and politics, and we're implementing it here because it comes from the bosses. You see, it's the question of follow the leader. Which is why you have a division like the one that we have here, which is never going to transform South Africa. Read all their literature. It has nothing to do with changing the status quo. It is something to do with maintaining the status quo because they earn money. The church has become a place of employment rather than a scene, a context for transformation.
Nobile, this conversation that has just happened, abantu abadala, what has it said to you as a young person? What has it shifted or not, or has it not shifted? Like, what's going through your mind now?
The biggest thing for me is, like I said, I think as the young people, we're confused. So I want to walk away after, discussing what do we do now from today onwards. We know there's local elections. What do I do as a young person? Do I participate? And if so, how do I then go in discerning which party to vote for? How do I exercise my rights? Like, what exactly are we saying that a young person can do?
And that's valid, Mfundisi, because we are part of a church that has a lot of do's and don'ts. Do this, we don't do this, we do this, we don't do this. So young people have been trained to then look for what's the do this and don't do that in certain areas, like in this area, where we can't now say, oh, well, it's open to interpretation, when we've taught them and trained them to listen to we do this, we don't do this, there's rules and regulations.
Let me tell you what has happened in the South African context. We have fundamental beliefs, we've got policies, but we also have an apocryphal message that says, Adventists don't do that. Adventists don't dance, but we dance in a wedding. Adventists don't do that, we do it in certain... So there's an unwritten apocrypha inside the Adventist church that says we don't engage in politics, but we honor politicians when they come to church. We love them. You get the point. We respect them, but we don't get into politics. But we carry their articles, the top bars. We go to them to seek for work, go to them for seek for money. Let me tell you something. We are lost. We need to be found. We are lost. The dirt in this world is both in the church and in society. And until the church straightens its jacket, the world will be lost forever.
Last words from you, Budlind. What do you say to someone out there who's still trying to grapple in their heads? I'm a Christian, the politics don't look so clean, I want to do right, I don't want to miss out on heaven, but I also want to feel like I'm adding value to my community.
No, life is about capacitating yourself to make decisions. The idea that there's a system that should dictate that to you is a fallacy.
Awesome. Last word from you, Ngo?
I think my biggest thing walking away from this discussion is how we had said that we have politics within the church and politics outside. So for me as a young person, I'd like us to start focusing on the politics within the church, and then maybe we can be more effective outside.
Awesome. Last word from you, Mfundisi.
Two things. The black church in this country must pull out of the union. The black church in this country must pull out of the union. I'll tell you the reason why. We were a Southern Union mission. We were not a union conference. We were inferior to this SAU, which was for whites, colors, and Indians. So because of a new political dispensation that Mandela brought in, whites felt they need to protect themselves by using our skins to hide their evil. So that union in Bloemfontein is a fake union. It's an incestuous union. A mother got married to a child. The child must pull out and become a mother. I'm telling the truth. That's why I have no respect for that union, because it is a fake organization. The GC has tolerated injustice in this country in order to protect its evils here.
And on that note, I want to say to you at home, when you're looking at yourself as a Christian, we're called to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And I don't think you can do that sitting in the confines of your church. So maybe you do need to look at what is your impact on the community around you and how actively are you involved in community activities. That is it from our side. Please continue the conversation online. And if you have any topics that you want us to go into, please remember to send them through. Thank you so much for joining us.
We There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see from afar. For our Father waits over the land to prepare a dwelling place. There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see from afar. For our Father waits over the land to prepare a dwelling place. And there's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see from afar. For our Father waits over the land to prepare a place. Count the months as weeks, count the weeks as days. See, I go to count, see, I go